Chapter 1. The Lost Dynasty and the Dominion of Knossos. We all know the story of the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull creature living in the giant labyrinth beneath the Palace of Knossos on the island of Crete. This is one of the classic horror stories of Greek mythology, a warning about savagery and divine punishment. But to find the truth about this monster, we must look past the stories of the hero Theseus and delve into the secret of a civilization that once existed and ruled. The Minoan civilization. In the late 19th century, the world witnessed one of the greatest archaeological discoveries when Sir Arthur Evans, a British archaeologist, began excavations on Crete. What he found was not just a ruin, but the remnants of civilization so brilliant and mysterious that it had no name in classical Greek records. This was a Minoan civilization, with its center of power being the Palace of Knossos. The Palace of Knossos was no ordinary structure. It was an archaeological enigma challenging all understanding of the Bronze Age. It was a massive architectural complex, built across multiple levels, encompassing hundreds of rooms, corridors, staircases, light wells, and storage chambers, all interwoven in such a complex and confusing way that it was often called a labyrinth at first sight. Even today, visitors to Knossos can easily get lost in its complexity. And here's the first twist that ancient Dossier must reveal. The labyrinth was not a prison, but the palace. The Greek word labyrinth does not mean a complex prison at all. It originates from the word labres, which means double axe, the most sacred and common symbol in Minoan culture, often appearing in religious rituals and on palace decorations. In other words, the labyrinth was a sacred name or nickname of the Palace of Knossos itself, the seat of religious and political power. When mainland Greeks spoke of being sent to the labyrinth, they meant being sent to King Minos's powerful palace. At its peak, around 2000 to 1450 BCE, the Minoan civilization was a maritime superpower dominating the entire Aegean Sea. This meant they controlled not only Crete, but also the trade and political activities on the islands and Greek mainland settlements, including Athens. Knossos was the center of an empire that needed no protective walls, suggesting a period of peace and absolute confidence in the strength of its naval fleet. This created great political and psychological tension. Athens, the foundation of later Greek civilization, was once a vassal to this island empire, which it considered half savage. They were forced to pay tribute in the form of taxes, goods, and sometimes slaves or sacrificial persons cyclically. This humiliation, the act of sending their finest youths to a foreign civilization for incomprehensible activities, was the first seed from which the monster story germinated. The Minoans were worshippers of the Earth Mother, and, most importantly, worshippers of the bull. The bull was not a monster to them, but a symbol of strength, rebirth, and fertility, a major deity in their beliefs. However, to the Athenians, who were nomadic peoples and later worshipped sky gods like Zeus, this bull worship was considered barbaric and alien. It was from this cultural difference and political humiliation that the Minotaur monster was born. It was a mythological tool used by the Athenians to explain the dominance of Cretans. The political enemy was not just strong, but monster, an unnatural combination of man and god. In Chapter 2, we will analyze how Minoans used the bull in their savage blood rituals, and how the Athenians transformed those rituals into a horrific tale of the man-eating bull monster. Chapter 2, the bull monster and blood rituals. The truth about sacrifice. If Chapter 1 established a labyrinth as the Palace of Knossos and the Minotaur as a political symbol, we must now decode the monster's man-eating behavior. What occurred at Knossos that led Athenians, in their humiliation, to believe their children were being slaughtered by a half-man, half-bull creature? The answer lies in bull leaping, the bull leaping ritual, and the devotion to blood in Minoan culture. For the Minoans, the bull was the center of their religious universe. It was a sacred creature, a symbol of supreme power, rebirth, and fertility of the Earth Mother. This bull worship was not seen as barbaric by the Minoans. It was a reverence for life force. However, to the mainland Greeks, who had shifted to worshiping anthropomorphic sky gods like Zeus, this bull reverence was considered savage and repulsive. This difference in religious belief created a deep gulf. Archaeology provided the clearest evidence of this obsession. In the frescoes excavated from Knossos, we see spectacular scenes of bull leaping. In this ritual, young athletes, both male and female, performed highly dangerous acrobatic feats, grabbing the horns and vaulting over the back of a charging bull. This ritual was both religious and athletic, yet it held deadly peril. The Minotaur is an exaggerated image of death. The Minotaur is not a creature. It is an exaggerated image of death lurking within the bull-leaping ritual. Imagine, Athenians were forced to offer their finest youth to Crete. These young people, perhaps political prisoners or slaves, participated in a strange ritual where they faced a giant bull, deemed an incarnation of the divine. Failures in the ritual were inevitable when an Athenian youth was gored or trampled to death. The Minoans may have viewed it as a sacred sacrifice to the bull god. But for the grieving Athenians back home, the story was relayed with ultimate fear. Their children were being massacred by a half-man, half-bull creature in a dark labyrinth. The Minotaur was born from the horror of accidents explained by religion. Furthermore, the myth of the Minotaur eating the Athenians reflects the terrible truth of a vassal state forced to sacrifice human lives to another power. Blood was shed on the island of Crete, whether through the bull-leaping ritual or through the political execution of rebellious Athenians. The Minoans may even have performed true human sacrifice rituals in rare cases to appease the gods. Archaeological evidence of human sacrifice at Nemesplia and Knossos has been fiercely debated. If these blood rituals were true, they provided the perfect material for the Athenians to distort the story. Their enemy was a man-eating monster. Therefore, the annual human food was not to feed a hungry beast, but to sustain a brutal political and religious order. Athenian youth were sent to Knossos to serve as sacrificial acrobats, slaves, or hostages. Athenian humiliation was mythologized into a tale of biological terror. The link to Poseidon. It was Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes, who gifted King Minos the white bull. This reflects the mainland Greeks' fear of Minoan sea power and the devastation of earthquakes, which Crete frequently experienced. The Minotaur, the half-bull, earth, and half-man creature, is a personification of fear before the uncontrollable power of sea and earth, a fear that Minos, by manipulating the divine, had turned into a tool of dominance. In summary, the Minotaur did not need to be a biological monster to be terrifying. It was a combination of savage religious ritual, bull leaping, political sacrifice, and religious manipulation, bull worship, viewed by the Athenians through a lens of hatred and fear. The birth of the Minotaur was the birth of a perfect propaganda tool. The Minotaur was created. It became the terror Athenians needed to explain Knossos' dominance. But how did the Athenians escape this domination? They needed a hero to end the shame. And that hero was Theseus, a figure mythologized to perform the final role in this story, the erasure of shameful memory. In Chapter 3, we will analyze how Theseus not only slew the Minotaur, but also killed the truth about the Minoan civilization. Chapter 3, Theseus and Media Manipulation, the erasure of shaming memory. If the Minotaur was the Athenian propaganda tool to explain their political humiliation and Minoan blood rituals, then Theseus was a figure mythologized to fulfill the final role, the elimination of that shameful memory. Theseus was more than a hero. He was a perfect political symbol for Athens as the Minoan civilization collapsed. The fall of Knossos occurred abruptly, possibly due to the Theros/Santorini volcanic eruption, circa 1600 BCE, earthquakes, or the invasion by the Mycenaeans, mainland Greeks. Subsequently, Athens and the mainland Greek civilization rose, becoming the new power in the Aegean. This was the moment they needed a narrative to explain this shift in power. Theseus was a tool for justification and legitimacy, ending humiliation. By having Theseus voluntarily join the tribute and slay the Minotaur, Athens ended once and for all the painful memory of having to pay human tribute to Knossos. This narrative was not just Theseus' personal victory, but the collective liberation of Athens, asserting civilization. Theseus' action transformed the fear of death into the triumph of intellect and bravery of the mainland Greeks. It positioned the Athenians as civilized people eradicating the barbaric, the bull-worshipping Minoans. The story of Ariadne and the thread further heightened the drama. Ariadne, King Minos' daughter, fell in love with Theseus and gave him a thread to find his way out of the labyrinth. This detail is not merely romantic. It is a sharp political metaphor. The fact that the Athenian hero needed the help of a Minoan insider to to defeat Minoan's own monster implies that Knossos' collapse was due not only to military strength, but also to internal division and betrayal. However, this betrayal was also cruel. Theseus abandoned Ariadne on the island of Naxos after killing the Minotaur. This action reflects Athens' complete political severance from any lingering remnants of Knossos. Conclusion: the Minotaur is a warning. The Minotaur, in the end, was not a creature. It was a monument of humiliation, demonized to allow Athens to emerge as a hero. The entire Minotaur story is a case study in how the victors rewrite history. By transforming the political enemy, the Minoans, into a biological monster, the Athenians effectively legitimized their new power, covered up their war crimes with the devastation they inflicted upon Knossos, erased the memory of their former vassal status. The Minotaur did not need to be a biological monster to be terrifying. It was a confluence of savage religious ritual, bull-leaping, political sacrifice, and media manipulation viewed by the Athenians through the lens of hatred and fear. It stands as a warning about the nature of power. Power always seeks to transform the fears of others into its own monsters. The truth is always stranger than a legend.